This is El Camino, a Breaking Bad film review. How's it going, everybody? During this movie review, I will be smoking one of Cigar International's fresh rolled Cubans. I got them in a pack of 40. Yeah, I've had quite a few already, and they are pretty delicious. So let's cut into this bad boy. We'll get to the whiskey, and then we will get to the movie review. It's good stuff. And for the whiskey, I thought it was pretty fitting to do a straight American, Crater Lake straight American rye whiskey, 100% rye. Before we start the review, just a quick overview. I kind of want to recap seasons 1 through 5 of Breaking Bad, the show itself, and then we'll get into my analysis of El Camino, the movie, and then I will maybe go into some things I think the director could have done that would have improved, and then some things he can do further down the road. Maybe some, some other sideshows other than Better Call Saul. Just a quick recap of seasons 1 through 5. My thoughts on them. Probably the best show I've ever seen, to be honest. I would say it's Shakespearean in the writing. Multiple writers did it. The director did write most of the episodes that are my favorite. One in particular is the season finale for season 2, ABQ. Wow. I was sitting on the edge of my couch in shock. For those who've watched it, all you have to say is the airplane scene and just how that all connected was tragic, mind-blowing, and you just didn't see it coming. Just because in the show they really do like to go back in time or into the future, but not quite tell you what's happening, and then all of a sudden, boom, it happens. The play that I most would say this is most like Shakespeare is King Lear, in the scope of the show's tragic consequences of Walt going from this innocent family man to tragic downfall at the end of season 5. Because King Lear had 3 daughters, I believe, that he just couldn't trust, and he ended up trying to grasp onto them. And basically, I think his overall purpose was wanting to give them what they wanted, but in his unwillingness to let go, he went mad and basically ruined his family. That is some good whiskey. Because in season 1, you have almost this Garden of Eden scene when the whole family is around the TV and Walt, in total innocence, is like, oh, how much do you actually collect in a meth bust, when he's talking to Hank. And it kind of dawns on his face. He kind of bites the apple in the garden, so to speak. And it's almost this knowledge that he gains that leads him down this path. And season 5 was really, in many ways, the most shocking emotion, like, not only plot twist-wise, but also emotionally, in these flashbacks that Walt has, where he goes back in time. He's walking through the old house, it being completely ruined, stripped through by the DEA. And he's walking through the house, and he has these flashbacks, and it's really sad to see him going back to this time of innocence in stark contrast with the monster he's become. It really, on a personal note, it really made me consider, I've got 3 kids, and it made me consider my own life choices. Just looking at how one mistake and stubbornness and unwillingness to, think about somebody other than yourself can lead to these horrible consequences. You can see the ripple effects it has. And I think that's one thing that put me into self-reflection mode, which is I really think what the director wanted to do is to be like, what do you live for? What is it that you wake up every morning, and if you got cancer, what would you say, this is the reason I live? And I think Walt obviously woke up and said, I don't really know why I'm alive. He was dealing with these existential questions that many of us have, and so he decided to finally have an adventure in his life. But it's kind of scary to think, why would cancer stop him from doing that in the first place, And why in our own lives would it take cancer to make us actually do whatever in the world that we wanted to do? And that's not just a live your best life kind of saying, but actually like what holds society together. Another thing I wanted to talk about in the series was the choice of vehicles used. And I think it's very telling why each character gets a specific vehicle. Some of them are pretty on the nose, such as Hank's Jeep Commander, because he's a commanding character. He's somebody that's in charge and wants to be in charge, and he epitomizes the American patriot, Walt, on the other hand, he is literally the downfall of America in a nutshell. That is what Walt is. The Pontiac Aztek that he drives is, in many ways, pretty darn ugly. I mean, you look at it, and Walt's not the most attractive guy, but I think it's more, you could almost say, on the inside. He's kind of an ugly guy when Season 5 is over. But I actually read up on the Pontiac Aztek, and a lot of car critics said that the Pontiac Aztek was the downfall of an 84-year-old company. The Pontiac Aztek was the downfall of an 84-year-old company. It was the last ugly scar on this gem of America. And if you see when the show starts, in January of 2008, I'm sure the directors weren't quite producing and filming in the time of the Great Recession for the first season, but GM did collapse, I think around 2010 or 2011, and so I think even unintentionally, the Pontiac Aztek is kind of marks the downfall of America in the Great Recession, because the Great Recession was this massive scar on America. Pontiac is one of the, almost as much as the Lehman Brothers, shows what the Great Recession did to America. And I think in many ways, not just the things that are wrong with Walt and his family, but Walt is also this bigger look at American society. He is the ugly side of our American society. He is prideful. He is stubborn-headed. He'll do anything to get what he wants, and he wants that American dream, and he will do anything that it takes to get it. And that was basically what caused the Great Recession, was this, this huge influx of demand for a $400,000 home and 2 nice vehicles, and this is everything that Walt wants. Yeah, I think the Aztek is an ugly scar on an 84-year-old legacy, and Walt's a massive scar on the legacy of his family history. And this car is a scar on my ability to do a movie review. One of my favorite scenes, just the filmography in all 5 seasons and El Camino is exceptional. I really enjoy the cinematographer's eye. I really enjoy what he the different angles, the time lapses especially. I think the time lapses really made the series stand out. And I liked how they included it in the movie. I liked the style continuing from all 5 seasons. There were some really good scenes in there. One of my favorite is when Walt goes out and buys himself a what was it? It was the Chrysler 300 SRT8. He goes out and gets Walt Jr. a Dodge Challenger SRT8, I believe it was. Challengers are the bigger ones, the ones that the cops can't afford. But they're revving the engines in the driveway, and it must have been a slider that they used, going back and forth between the 2 engines revving, back and forth. Then they're both revving it, and they look at each other through the window, and it was one of the most badass, not just American, but father-son. It was father-son connection. It was like this great American muscle, and you just felt like, I mean, you had a bald eagle hard-on sort of thing going on. It was awesome. I think the very final episode of season 5, it was good. The one thing I wouldn't fault the show with is that it didn't go too long. It wasn't this TV show that said, I want to make money and that's my only goal. It wasn't like Walking Dead. It wasn't like it was 5 seasons, and it seemed to play itself out quite nicely and ended right when you were like, alright, how much longer is this really going to last, and when are we going to get tired of this constant, toll and tax on Walt's family? And it also wasn't like Firefly, which the introduction of the TV's intro did remind me a lot of the Firefly's intro, where it was, take my land, but you can't take the sky from me. I was always singing that when I was listening to the intro of Breaking Bad, because it was the same, country, rugged west, last frontier sort of feel. But it wasn't like Firefly in that it actually stretched itself out, fleshed itself out a little bit, and, really got into the different lives of all these characters. And the season finale of season 5 was good. I just think Walt finally admitting I did this for me was kind of a sigh of relief, because you were almost with Skylar when you thought he was just about to say for the 50th time that I did this for the family, Skylar, and you're like, screw you, no you didn't. It was kind of I don't want to say it was a nice way, but it was a nice rounded capstone to the tragedy that was Walt's life. Alright, so let's get into the El Camino section of this movie review. El Camino's filmography was better than the TV show. The thing with the TV show is, I'm a big fan of time lapses, but the time lapses that they used were a little bit, there seems something a little bit off about the quality. And with them upping the quality in El Camino, the time lapses just looked so much more magical. There was a certain sharpness and crispness about the time lapses that really put you in this day in, day out of this desert city in New Mexico. You've really got to credit the movie with the creative shots that they take when Jesse and Mike are standing by the river, and there's that shot that's dropped right where the water is looking at them, and the water's flowing by. There's a lot of these big American frontier shots that really take in the beauty of the country. The TV show and the movie definitely encapsulate this theme of the last frontier. uh, Walt hides out in New Hampshire in the last season of the show in this little cabin, much like the Unabomber. And at the end of El Camino, Jesse goes up to Alaska, and we'll touch on that later. El Camino, the movie itself started off a little bit confusing for me. I wasn't expecting too much of this, flashbacks to the past, and especially developing the Jesse's so-called friendship with Todd. Todd was a bit of a creepy boy, almost like Ted Bundy in a lot of ways, just killing because it's fun. Well, that's funny. His name is Jesse in real life. Jesse Plemons. Well, maybe that was why he felt so close to Jesse. But Todd was really this Ted Bundy character who took pride in killing while at the same time gave a really friendly sort of, a creepy friendly sort of vibe. His attraction to Jesse, his attraction to the lady that distributes the drugs, it's all a little bit antisocial in the way he does it. Him feeding Jesse ice cream, him giving Jesse cigarettes. It's almost this way to rope him in. And one of the scenes that at first really confused me, and I was honestly at first a little bit upset about it, is they go on this long road trip, or not road trip, but this day out together, Let's go out as friends, Todd says. But what at first confused me about it was when Jesse went for the gun in the glove box. You'd think he would just shoot right away. And two things actually made me rethink why he wouldn't pull the trigger, and why it made sense that he didn't. The first reason is that he's still got all the other guys to deal with. A whole army of them that he probably couldn't take out with just a pistol. And even if he gets a few of them down, they could end up killing him and then going after Brock, or keeping him captive and still going after Brock. So there is a very good consequential reason that Jesse wouldn't shoot Todd. Another reason is just the Stockholm syndrome of Jesse being very much like this tormented golem character. He was chained up, shackled, he was a prisoner, and not just a prisoner physically, but a mental prisoner. They were playing mental games with him, and it just gives you slight tastes of what they actually did to him, without actually going too much into it. But one of the things about the show that did actually kind of confuse me a little bit is that Jesse's in Todd's apartment looking for the cash, and these two fake police officers come up, and you think, oh no, Jesse's really screwed now, and they end up being fake officers. But it did kind of confuse me why they left Jesse with the money when there was two of them, and I could kind of see the whole alerting the entire apartment to him being there, but they didn't have to use a gun to take him out. They could have silently taken care of him. And they were posing as police officers. They could have easily used their authority to make the pesky neighbor turn around and say, "Sir, we need you to step back. This is a crime scene." But all in all, that was really the only major plot hole I saw, and it wasn't too big of a deal. I kept watching, and I was glad that whole flashback with Todd episode was over, because honestly, after just getting through season 5, I was already really tense, and I was like, let's move on, let's see if this can resolve for Jesse. And ultimately, it did resolve for Jesse. So I was glad that the scene moved on from this relationship with Todd, because I wasn't too interested in exploring that the whole time. But I do see why ultimately it was important to getting Jesse on his way to Alaska. Now, one thing that did kind of confuse me on top of those police officers not leaving Jesse dead and taking the whole money and giving him a third was that when Jesse went to go ask for the 1800, it was probably the cocaine speaking. He says, well, let's play a game of, old Western standoff. And you gotta give it to the show. They just completely followed this great American frontier to the last, one of the last big scenes. And I liked it. It was kind of a Red Dead Redemption moment, this little standoff. One of the parts I really liked about that scene was, I don't know the two actors' names, but the two people that posed as police officers, there was almost this improvisation. He says, let's do this pistol standoff. He says to Jesse, let's do this pistol standoff. And he goes up to his partner and kind of gets in his face, and he's like, what are you going to do about it? I don't know if he did cocaine to actually do the scene, but he got into his partner's face and says, what are you going to do about it? And it was almost this SNL sort of improvisation where his partner's just kind of like, he's trying not to laugh. And I'm glad they put it in there. I don't know if that was improvisation, but it worked really well with the scene, and it brought the scene alive in a way that I really enjoyed. But then they do the standoff, and, well, let's just say that Jesse is on fire, okay? It's a cool scene. I'd rather you go watch it if you haven't seen it. And kind of a random side note, but going back to the cars, one of the funny things about saying, Jesse, you're on fire in that scene is the car that Jesse drives, the Pontiac Fiero, that little mid-sized coupe that has the headlights flash up, was famous for catching on fire. But anyways, Jesse is successful in getting at least another $1,800 to pay Ed, so he can continue on to his journey of escaping Albuquerque. And I do like that at least one of the main characters gets a sense of wholesome closure. It was kind of a band-aid on top of a series of tragedies, which is all to say it was a spray of perfume on a stinking corpse. After multiple run-ins with tragedy, Jesse finally gets this closure after having to kill people he didn't want to kill. After having to do things and see things that he never expected to see as just a low-life drug peddler in the beginning of Season 1. After Jane's death, he finally gets this sense of, not that he can start a new life, but he can at least have some sense of recovery. Now, I'm not really sure if I'm a 100% on board fan of this Jesse's free in Alaska now, and it's nice, but it almost had this, you see Jesse go from this punk boy to a tortured man, he's almost uncomfortable in his skin by the end of it. Now, Jesse driving off at the end of El Camino into this great Alaska wilderness reminds me of the movie Boyhood, where you see the boy go from this young, curious little boy who's not experienced life yet to, a young adult. And the end of Boyhood is he goes out into the wilderness, and there's this sense of there's still a whole life ahead of him. And I guess it's an open-ended, it's almost too open, I think, is the issue I have with Jesse driving off into Alaska. Is I like that he does at least have a sense of peace, but it is also, it leaves a lot on the table. And the thing I didn't like about Boyhood's final message was there was never really any closure other than the fact that, well, something's gotta happen next. I liked that they brought Skinny Pete and Badger back into the movie. They were very entertaining characters and actually really great actors. I liked that Skinny Pete finally took off his hat and kind of revealed his identity. I think these low-life drug dealers, what we'd call them, actually went from being punks to, you know, maybe they still had their flaws, but they matured in a certain amount of way. Especially Jesse. Jesse had this Passion of Christ look when he knocks on Badger and Skinny Pete's door. You open the door and you're almost not able to recognize him. You're like, he looks like the long hair. He looks like the Passion of the Christ is what it reminded me of. Scarred, bloodied, and I'm not sure if they were trying to make some sort of, suffering and redemption sort of illusion, but honestly, that's all I could think of. And when they answer the door, you can't help but be a little bit overjoyed that these guys had been reunited. It's kind of like, Bilbo returning to, or it's kind of like Frodo returning to Samwise. It's this reunited, the party's reunited. These guys are back together, and I really like how I think it was Skinny Pete that was thinking on his feet really quickly. Let's do this. Badger, you take this car to the border. Jesse, you take my Pontiac Fiero, and I will keep the El Camino, which is what the entire movie was named after. And I really like that he thought on his feet. It shows that Jesse, not only Jesse has trained him, but he's also matured as a character himself. And when Jesse's getting ready to leave, I really like when Skinny Pete takes off his hat and says, Jesse, you're my hero. It's great. It shows just how much Jesse has matured as a character and how much he deserves this final send-off, and how we as fans have just been waiting for him to finally have some sense of closure. There's so many other characters that are still waiting in the shadows, waiting for some sense of closure. I'm glad that Jesse got it. Don't get me wrong. I'm really glad that he got it. But let's think of all the characters that don't have it. Skylar was left with as much as she has her faults of trying to be on board with Walt when the going's good and jumping off board when the DA gets involved. You do have a sense that she is majorly scarred and still somewhere struggling to make ends meet. Walt Jr. is the one I feel the worst for. The sense of innocence when he finds out everything at once in Season 5 is a complete blow, and you don't see him in this El Camino movie. One thing I think the filmmakers could pick up on, and in case they're listening, this is something I think would really capture the attention of us fans, is if they came out with a new show or movie and simply just called it Walt. It'd be a continuation of where's Walt Jr. now? How has he dealt with this inner turmoil? Is he picking up in his father's footsteps? Is he a product of his father? Did the apple fall that far from the tree? And also, how has Skylar moved on? I think it'd be a really cool thing to see. It is really sad at the end of Season 5 seeing the flashbacks to Season 1 where Walt is just, he kind of, in Season 1 he reminds you of anybody's father. He strips down to his whitey-tidies. I don't know if you guys ever had fathers like that, but my dad would always, come down in his bathrobe, and then every once in a while his whitey-tidies would show or something, and it's just kind of a very old man, bumbling father sort of figure, and you really kind of have this soft spot for him in Season 1. When you see the pride and the darkness and brokenness that he's allowed enter into his life and basically take him over and say that, he gets to the point where he says, you should fear me. I'm the danger. You kind of start losing. That was the thing with the show and the movie is it was always hard to know who to sympathize with and who to cast as an enemy. Walt is kind of an anti-hero. He's somebody that kind of rooting for, but never quite able to sympathize with. I think El Camino, all in all, I think it was a pretty good movie. I would give it. Now I'm gonna give the movie a drumroll score, and I think El Camino by itself, without the show, doesn't quite work as a standalone movie. That's the thing, is Gillian Flynn definitely knew that this movie was meant to take... I mean, it picked up right where Season 5 left off. So, I would give it overall a 92%. And that's because I love the filmography. I would give that 100%. I mean, excellent stuff. It was on par with, like Revenant. It was great filmography. Your eye is entertained the whole time, and it's not just eye candy. It's not complex cinematography with shallow content. It is complex cinematography with very deep content, which is why this is almost the height of filmmaking. And the places where it falls short is really just a couple minor plot holes. Like I mentioned, the police officers, having the opportunity to totally take advantage of Jesse, and I mean, but it's minor stuff. It's really minor stuff, and just the fact that it's not its own standalone entity. It's always going to have a little bit of a crutch on all 5 seasons of the show. My dad was asking if he should watch El Camino, and I just said no. It's like watching, I mean, it's not even like watching the Super Bowl without the rest of the season. You can't just watch it by itself, It's not its own thing. It is very much dependent on watching all 5 seasons. I think Breaking Bad was at its highest right when Walt was starting to lose his innocence. I think ABQ, the season finale of Season 2, was the best episode of the show. Total. Complete. Better than the movie, better than the show. It was the height of the show, in my opinion. It was where everything came to a head, and Walt was responsible for all these murders without actually, pulling the trigger. It epitomized the show. Jeez. You really wish that Walt could have just finally decided enough is enough. We have enough cash. We're going to be able to make it because we're a family and we have each other. And that's the thing Walt never realizes is, even though he has people around him that love him, Walt Jr. is so dedicated to his father, and it's so sad to see that separation finally take place, and Walt Jr. almost come out as his own man, He kind of has to. The phone call in the principal's office is really the final straw between them, and you don't really see them again other than Walt Sr. looking through the laundry window and seeing Walt Jr. enter the house. You don't see them at all in El Camino. And that's the one thing Jesse doesn't have, is Jesse's got the moral compass, but he doesn't have the people around him. Everyone around Jesse ends up dying. Andrea ends up dying. Jane ends up dying. Jesse can never have people around him. Badger and Skinny Pete don't quite understand him. He's at a higher level than them in many ways, emotionally and mentally. He never had a character there that stuck around long enough that really understood Jesse. Walt, if anything, Jesse was more of a son to Walt than Walter Jr. was. And I think Walt understood Jesse, but Walt pushed everybody that loved him away. And so it was almost like, magnets that don't attract, opposite magnets, that it was just going to end up in separation regardless. Walt and Jesse were great partners, but and that's perhaps what I really, at the core of it, don't like about Jesse's final scene in El Camino. What I don't like about his send-off is that he could end up coming off the better for it, but all you see is him getting up and disappearing. So that's it for this review, guys. Please like and subscribe, and please let me know. I can review anything on Netflix that you want. Let me know a TV show or a movie that you want next week, and I will review it. Same exact format. I'm going to give a percentage score with the drum roll. I'm thinking about reviewing Black Mirror episodes. And that could include the Bandersnatch movie. That is one series I'm considering. Could definitely rewatch those. But let me know if there's anything else. We'll stay Netflix specific for right now, but I could also watch Hulu, or really there's not anything that I would shy away from. One movie I'm looking forward to is Ford versus Ferrari, and there's also a couple good war movies that are coming up that I could definitely not going to shy away from, and you might be seeing new release reviews on this site, on this channel, and but let's see in the comments, whatever comment with the title that has the most likes, I will review that next week.